Hello, good morning. They asked me to do it in English. It's okay for you, or do you prefer French?
French, please. French. English. French, please. Français.
Comme un vrai belge, tu peux faire bilingue.
Oui.
Sauf qu'on change.
Donc je fais en flamand.
Oui. Oh, bien.
Okay. Well, let's do it in English. They asked me to do it in English, so I'm sorry for the French people. You maybe can do it in French if you
Ah, non,
well,
c'est plus facile anglais.
So, let's go. Let's start about this little man who was bigger than life, really bigger than life, Jacques Ledoux. So let's start at the end, try to have an idea how he worked, how he was, how he inspired us as cinephiles and as friends. In 1988, the Dutch government decided to give the Erasmus Prize to a personality, important personality. The Erasmus Prize is like the Nobel Prize, but it did go to personalities like Chagall, Kokoschka, Arnoncourt, Robert Schumann, and so on. All these kind of people got the big Erasmus Prize. And only once they gave the prize to filmmakers. That was in, yes, 65, to Charles Chaplin, and ex aequo, so to say, to Ingmar Bergman. And yeah, nice, strange couple. I would like had to be there to see both filmmakers greeting the Queen of Holland. So in 87, they decided again to give a prize to a filmmaker. And I sat in the jury with my friend Hubert Bals from the Rotterdam Festival, and one of the best Dutch film critics, Ellen Waller, and a few other people, I don't remember them. And I had the impression that it was Tarkovsky who was candidate. And we disliked very much Tarkovsky. Hubert Bals and I disliked him very much. So we tried to find an alternative and say, why not a curator? Why not Jacques Ledoux? And this idea was accepted. And we defended it in the following way. A curator, the director of a Cinémathèque, can also be an artist, can also be creative. That was a new idea because now, curatorship is something more important than the artists they are curating. But so Ledoux got the Erasmus Prize. And just a year, and he died the same year. He never got the prize. He knew that he had won the prize, but he never got the prize. He died the same year, 88. From 87, I was at the Dutch. I was asked to be deputy director of the Dutch Film Archive. I quit the university where I had worked for 10 years. And I went to see my friend Jacques Ledoux and I said, help me, give me advice, what can I do, how to handle this film archive in Amsterdam, Nederlands Film Museum, which is now I. And he said, do you really want to lead a monastic life? Because he didn't believe that I was able to do it. And he was saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. I did it. I did it for only 5 years. And, well, I say the best I can do is try to imitate, to copy everything I have learned and I have seen the last decennia in Brussels, where I knew Jacques from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. What's so difficult to try to explain for people who didn't have know the person, of course, but didn't have known the period of these pioneers, because Jacques started the Cinémathèque at the end of the 40s, one can say, and his philosophy, he had a real philosophy of what an institution, because that was important for him too, it is an institution for film culture. What to do, how to conceive it. Of course, there were examples in other countries, big examples, Cinémathèque Française in Paris, in England also, or in other countries, but he always found that it was not enough. He wanted to do everything. Not only, well, let's start with the beginning, acquiring films. What were films at the time? We should not forget that. Prints in reels, in boxes, in cans. That were films, that was film history, cans. So how to acquire these cans? And there you have the whole history, which is similar for most of the people who worked at the time. It was mafia, stealing, begging, and so on, trying to find also, to acquire these films, these cans with the history of cinema. And a very interesting thing here with Ledoux is that he got good lobbies with the enemy. The enemy were the distributors, the big American distributors. He was friendly with them. They had a good relationship. When I came to Amsterdam, for instance, many years later, the relationship with the American distributors was very bad, inexistent, you know. So he was friendly with them, and they were friendly with him, and they gave them the prints, the whole prints, the subtitle prints, and so on. Another enemy at the time, and I worked there for 12 years as producer, was television. You cannot imagine how inimical these two parties were, film and television, you know. That for the cinema, television was really the big rival, the big enemy. But he had fantastic relationship with television. With the Flemish television, we are in Belgium, Flemish television and French television. Why? Because he had a lot of his assistants or his colleagues working for the Cinémathèque at the time who went over to television. Yannick Bruinooge, French television, Denise Delvaux, the wife of André Delvaux, who worked with Ledoux, went to television. So he had partners there working. And to give you a concrete example how I worked with Ledoux, I was producer at the television, Flemish television, for 12 years in the 60s, early 70s. I had a program called the Andere Film, which was a very experimental program of movies, an experimental television program, late night show with experimental films, a lot of films which were never showed usually on television. Let's say Steve Voskind, even Andy Warhol, and so on. The first film of Chantal Ackerman, for instance, also was showed in my program. How did it work? Well, I screened the films for my program in his cinema, and he came looking at the films with me. And he said, that's very interesting. You have the copy? You bought the copy? I said, no, I have no money to buy the copies. Not like Denise Delvaux and all the other people who could buy prints, you know. No, I have to send the copy back next week to London or to New York and so on. You have your program on Sunday, so let's keep the film here a moment. I will bring it at Sunday because everything was live at the time. I bring you the copy, be sure. And of course, he went with the copy, with the print, and he made a copy in his laboratory or in the laboratory of his friend Dimitri Balashov, Titra. So he acquired all these films from television, and that was a deal. So we had a very good deal. All the films, the copies we bought and we showed at that time, I don't remember, but I think it may be 30 features a month, you know, because film was the most popular program and the cheapest. And we bought, most of the time we bought the films and we subtitled them. So all these things went to the Cinémathèque. So he acquired a lot of prints through this good collaboration. He disliked television very much, but once in a while he worked with television for these big interviews with filmmakers we made, like Cinéma de Notre Temps. Denise Delvaux made the long interviews with Fellini and so on. I did one with Josef von Sternberg and Harry Gummen. Sometimes there was a big participation. That's acquisition of prints. The other was conservation and preservation. I think that Nicola will talk a little about that more, because in the heritage of the Cinémathèque you still have, of course, what Ledoux built as at the time, a model, a perfect archive for preservation and restoration also. But that was not enough, of course. The most important thing was to show the films, how to show them in your own cinema, and from the 60s on, early 60s on, we had in Brussels that fantastic film museum, Cinémathèque, the screening room, the cinema, where 3 films a day were showed the whole day, the whole year round. You know, when I came to Amsterdam, 1 film a week was showed in our cinema, and not during the summer. So the first thing I did is 3 films a day the whole year round. So showing as much as possible, and then even later he built the second theater only for silent films, which was at the time and still is something exceptional. That shows already the enormous interest, area of interest he had, from early silent to the newest of the newest film tendencies, you know, experimental films. And of course, for the older films, he had his normal cinema. For the difficult silent films, always with music, with live music, live piano, which was André Delvaux at the time played, especially before the cinema, before the film museum was opened. But also his interest for everything which was new at the time, the experimental, the underground, the very independent filmmakers. And that's the reason why he created a special event. Because he said in normal way we cannot show this kind of products, non-commercial products. So the Festival of Knock, the experimental festival, 5 of them we had, more or less 5, was the concretization of his idea of how can I show these films nobody wants to see, actually. Or just a few friends and elite and avant-garde. So how can I build an event around it? And I don't only show the films which were made in New York, in underground, or in Germany, and so on, but how can I stimulate? Because that's also a very important concept. I think it's to stimulate. How can I stimulate also? Not only show the things who are done, but to stimulate new, fresh filmmakers. So Aquagevart was introduced, and filmmakers were able to have material, stock material, to make an experimental film, like Martin Scorsese with The Big Shave, you know, with the material from the archive, from the lab, Aquagevart. A film was made, the film was selected for the festival, and of course Ledoux acquired the copy, or one or two copies for his own archive. So there was a very large range of activities. Education also. His film courses. You see, film studies started then at the film schools in the early 60s, but he thought that the Cinémathèque was also the place where to give courses in cinema. And he had the course of aesthetic and history, the French side and the Flemish side. And one day he asked me, will you give the film history course? Or both, I don't know, film aesthetic and film history. I said, my God, no, I cannot give film history, because, you know, I don't like Citizen Kane, you know, and how can I give film history if you don't, no, you can do it, But I didn't do it. So I did not. So he was ready to accept this kind of strange, eccentric behavior, because he himself was, of course, the biggest eccentric person you can imagine, with a very strange combination, because he wanted the system he had imagined and practiced very straight. The system had to be very straight and very closed, you know, the system of preservation and so on. So all this different department for his ideal Cinémathèque. And then we are free. If we have a very good system, we can have fantasy, we can have chaos, we can have anarchy, we can have everything. But we need that thing which is well made. And it was also the way he worked, you know, this kind of perfectionism, even something Calvinistic in it, and then the most incredible fantasy and anarchy also. So, And for me, preparing this, I say, well, there are two persons in my life who learned me a lot about this double system. It's Jacques Ledoux, and total other field is Grémas, the semiotician in France, where I did my doctorate, PhD. And he had the same, you know, it was the system was so rigid, incredible. But as soon as the system was there, his system, everything could go. We could play and joke, but you needed that base, that solid base, a kind of institution, but which made fantasy possible, you know, and imagination possible, not bureaucracy, on the contrary. So I learned from both men, I learned a lot, and I tried to do it in my life too, at the university later, and at the Cinémathèque later, and as a filmmaker too. As a filmmaker too, it's very important to have this double approach, to have something very straight, and then to say, let's go. Everything can go, everything works or not, we see. But you need the safety behind it or under it. What else, which I think is important too, is that the Cinémathèque was very open to people who wanted to see films, you know. But Ledoux never showed us, or showed Alain René, all his friends, Agnès Varda, Truffaut and so on, all these people who came to the Cinémathèque to see films, never showed the films on a table, on a viewing table. No, never. Always in a projection room, you know. And most of the time, him being in the projection room too. So a film has to be projected. Also, yeah, another point, but it's decentralization, making film copies, 60mm in that case, available for all the film clubs, institutions, and so on, with a very nice and big collection at the time, you know. So there's really behind it a philosophy, I think, a straight philosophy of filmmaking. And the strange thing also is that Ledoux never wrote. I think there are no texts of Ledoux, maybe some in the Fiat archives, I don't know. But it was a man of oral culture. He talked a lot all the time, and he talked with everybody, even with the students who were there at the séance or the Cinémathèque, but he never wrote a text. So I never... in this field of enmity also, not much cooperation between the different departments of the film culture. Of course, the FIAF was an important link, a way to have good contacts, as good as possible, with colleagues, which was not always the case, but it was the ambition of the FIAF to have that. It's only later, I think, that it really worked with exchanges and so on. Because at the beginning, I think the FIAF was helpful, of course, but was not really open, because all the cinematheques were very closed. They had no catalog, you know. They didn't want to have catalogs, and so on. So to end, just what were his hobbies for cinema? I say, well, everything. He was interested in everything which had to do with cinema, except family movies, the home movies. I think that's something missing in the Cinémathèque, or missing, not present in the Cinémathèque. Yeah, I think I have more or less. Oh yes, one of his hobbies, of course, and it was the first who was starting this thing, doing lists of the most this and the best film of all time. So it was a new thing, and he liked very much this kind of play. You know, it was like a play, and just one of his big research was asking for, I think, 100 or something historians and film buffs and film specialists all over the world to give a list of the most important and misappreciated American film since the beginning of the cinema. And he was very excited. I remember him telling, I do this and we'll discover. He discovered nothing. He said, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this, you know. Night of the Hunter, of course, Night of the Hunter is perfect. Even, I think, Singing in the Rain or something was in this list. So he was very much disappointed by it. Something he disliked also, and at the time it was not that important, it was the marketing of the things, you know, publishing programs, flyers, and so on. The Cinémathèque are just a small program, you know. He despised it. It cost a lot of work and it cost a lot of money. And I think I must say that Gabriel Claes, who was following the curatorship of Ledoux at the Cinémathèque, did very well this transfer in the new times, you know, because without that today it's impossible to survive, you know. So that was one of the other things he didn't like and he didn't want to work with. I think I said what I wanted to say about Ledoux, that one of the, after Gabriel Claes, who did, I think, wonderful work in continuing and adapting to the new times, the new director of the Cinémathèque, Nicola Mazzanti.
As Eric said, unfortunately, Ledoux basically didn't write a word. His interviews in the newspapers and in the reviews are rare, and when they are, they are very basic. He talks about certain programs or certain need of money that has always been there. There is one exception. There is a long interview on Cinéma 69, published in May 1969, where he says things that turn the world of archives upside down because it is May 69. And when I go to a FIAF Congress and I hear the nonsense we're talking about, and then I think that this guy, in 1962-63, created the concept itself of a Cinémathèque, built FIAF out of nothing, and today is not even mentioned in most of the books that talk about FIAF around field, I think is a great homage to him and a great shame for all of us. That's why I put this title. Jacques Ledoux is the first film archivist. There is no doubt whatsoever. I was a kid, I was naive, and I came to this business more than 30 years ago. And until a few years ago, I was also victim of this dominant ideological discourse that is dominating our field, which is the so-called opposition between Lindgren and Langlois. The opposition between conservation, preservation, and exhibition. And I was a kid and I didn't understand. I mean, I thought, is it possible that after 60 years these guys are still talking about these things? Let's keep this question in mind, because then let's go to the life of Jacques Ledoux. As I said, he didn't write. So what we have to understand, he wanted things to get done. He had a strict system, an obsessive system sometimes. He was driven by very strong ideas and concepts, which led him to do the things he did, including abandoning Fiat to his sad fate. First thing, Jacques Ledoux was not Jacques Ledoux. He was called Silberman. He was born in Poland, he was Jewish. He moved very young to Brussels. And at the age of 16, he started going to cineclubs and cineclub. He went, at 16, he went to screenings organized by the people who then would create the Cinémathèque, and saw Le Chien d'Alou, Louis Buñuel, and that was it. Then he said, that was it. Then he became a cinephile. He visited the several cineclubs organized in time. He changed his name, not to Ledoux, to Jalil. Ledoux doesn't exist until 1944, when he comes out of the war and literally escapes the gas chambers by jumping off a train going to the camps. He was brought on the train. That was not a freight train, as for many other people. It was a normal train. The train slowed down close to Namur because there is a curve and a bend and a slope, and he jumped off the window. He lost his glasses, couldn't find them, meandered in the woods, and escaped the camps. Then he hid himself into a monastery, and where he found a print of Nanook of the North, that the legend goes. This was the fourth print in the collection of the Cinémathèque Royale de Belgique. When he left, there were 50,000. So that's what Ledoux did to the concept of collecting, from 4 to 50,000 in 40 years. I never met Jacques Ledoux, because when Cinema Ritrovato invited the Cinémathèque Royale, he had just died, and there was the interim period before the nomination of Gabriel Claes. There is so much that can be said, but I will try make an effort to go systematic. First, let's start from the institution that he joined in 1944, the Cinémathèque Royale, which is a foundation, is still a foundation, is not a part of a larger ministry or whatever. Actually, it's a completely independent, hence always underfunded institution, whose statutes clearly state that our job is to do the following: collect cinema, all cinema, with no adjectives, no national cinema, no Belgian cinema, no good cinema, no bad cinema, cinema. Collect all possible documentation on cinema, and we have the largest documentation in all languages. From Suomi to Japanese to Chinese, you can come to the Cinémathèque, you will find all the reviews and many books. Preserve and safeguard the cinema, again, all cinema, and make it accessible to the public. And then there is a long list of ways by which you make it accessible to the public. And to cut it down shortly, I would say making them available by any necessary means. And then not by chance that I choose the words of Malcolm X for that. because, as I said, with a half a joke, but you also know me now that I never joke. The third on the left, on this picture of Geronimo and his friends, was Ledoux. We all should know, but we all forgot that our is a guerrilla warfare. We are here to do what is needed for the films. The rest is secondary. A cinemathèque is not an end in itself, as we all think it is today. A cinemathèque is a mean to an end, and the end is the conservation of cinema, of documentation about cinema, and making it available to everybody. There is no doubt whatsoever that exhibition is part of the DNA of the Cinémathèque and of what Ledoux wanted to do. First of all, it was born out a group of about a cineclub, from a cineclub, Le Grand des Arts. Secondly, and this was a cineclub that organized a screening every month, to which more than 2,000 people participated every time. And it showed, the program is very interesting because it is not the typical idea of old films. Actually, it showed films that were made like 2-3 years before, because they were films that could not be seen in Belgium. In '62, we finally managed to get its first cinema that is built inside a museum, which is one of the earliest museums, and the only one that I know of that is based around the concept that a museum of moving images, the images must move. And it's not by accident that if you go to the beautiful exhibition of the Lumière brothers, there are two pieces that work and move. A kinetoscope and a théâtre optique. Guess where they come from? From Brussels. All the others are dead skeletons on the wall. Beautiful skeletons, but they don't move, except two. But in order to show films and to create a museum of what cinema is, you need to collect it. And that's why he managed to collect films from, immediately, as I said, 4 films in '44, 50,000 films when he left. Titles, not copies, titles. And he did it by any necessary means. There was a camionette, a little van with 2 people on it. One still working with us, another one retired, and unfortunately is not well now, who would weekly go around all the distributors in town and say, "Bonjour, t'as des copies? Quelle copie tu me donnes aujourd'hui? Ça va, Christophe, ça va, les, prenez!" And would take the prints and bring them to the Cinémathèque. All of them, systematically, every week. You don't wait the prints to come to you, you look for them, or you are not an archive. Then he talked to the distributors, and there is this thing about Ledoux, like he would copy the films, yeah, maybe a couple of them, but fuck, you can't copy 78,000 titles, that's what we have. No, in 1967, he signed an agreement with the Motion Pictures Association of America in order to stipulate the terms under which all the American studios were allowed to deposit print at the Cinémathèque Royale de Belgique. 1967. And 2 years ago, I remind you, FIAF was torn apart from this discussion about the producers are members or not. I mean, 67, the problem was solved. We will see what happened in a minute. So collect in order to show. And not only through and collect a collection means also for Ledoux and for us to create an environment in which filmmakers would make new works. See, the goal of a Cinémathèque is not to keep the past, is to make sure that there is a future for what was produced and for what will be produced. I tell you one story. That is that I write it on the wall on top of my bed. There's a filmmaker, relatively well-known, who came to me and said, you know how I became a filmmaker? I said, no. He said, well, it was easy. I was doing theatre. I went regularly to Cinémathèque because I like films. And then one day I went for Il Gattopardo in Visconti, and it was sold out because our cinema is small, so it was sold out. So I said, okay, well, whatever. Go back, and on the march, on the steps, going outside, I found a ticket. So I took the ticket and said, I found a ticket. I went in, I saw the Gattopardo. It was not a restoration, it was a bad print, we still have it. It's a scratched, it's a slightly faded, it's not a good print. And he said, I saw the film, and then was I decided that I would be a filmmaker, and theatre is bullshit, which, by the way, I agree. Particularly at the time. So he said, okay, and then he became a filmmaker who went on winning all awards and Oscars, and, no, not Oscars, and prizes and so on. That's what the Cinemathèque is meant for. Guess who produced the first film by Martin Scorsese? Guess who? Jacques Ledoux. It was Jacques Ledoux who obtained the Agfa Gerhardt would make available, I forgot, 16 reels or 16mm new reversal film for filmmakers to make their new films. And he was the one who, among other juries, selected the script and the proposal by Martin Scorsese that then became The Big Shave. He sent the reels to New York for Martin to shoot The Big Shave. He was the one that got The Big Shave back and awarded Big Shave with the prize of L'Âge d'Or, which, for you, those of you who do not know, is the place where all the avant-garde in the modern avant-garde was born. Ask Peter Kubeka. His words were, Knokke, the festival in Knokke saved my life and made it possible that the avant-garde movement thrived after 1963 because it brought the Mekas and the Kubeka together and created an environment in which avant-garde filmmakers would produce new films and would talk to each other. That was not the best festival in the world about avant-garde. It was the fucking only one. Nobody ever made a festival about avant-garde before Jacques Ledoux. The list is long. Truffaut doing the interview with Hitchcock, he watched all the films at Cinémathèque Royale. Alain Resnais says, Mon maître, Jacques Ledoux est mort, when he died. Mon maître, Alain Resnais. Varda, who goes to Knokke with her films. Ledoux is the first one who dares to show the first film by Agnès Varda outside of France, where, in Brussels, at the Séminaire du Cinéma. The list, as I said, is long. Chris Marker, La Jetée, could not be made without Jacques Ledoux. Psychological, economical support, and so on. And he plays in it, by the way. This is what a Cinemathèque is. It's a place where we prepare the future of cinema. And that is clear in Jacques Ledoux' legacy. Conservation. Strange enough, he starts preserving film in 1960s. And then he established a laboratory in the 70s. Does anybody of you know when the first reconstruction of a film, as we call it today, restoration, was made? When and where? You would say, I know, Papalas in the 80s? Yeah, you're right. Jacques Ledoux, 1957, he reconstructed Tagebuch einer Verlorenen, starting from the 3 prints he had. 1968, he proposed to FIAF that we compare all the existing prints in the archives of the classics so we could know which one is the best to be kept preserved. Jacques Ledoux is a collectionneur? Yes, my ass. Jacques Ledoux in 1959 says, je suis absolument contre l'exclusivité. Toutes les cinémathèques doivent avoir tous les films. All archives should own all the films. That's why we worked, since he had a laboratory, he preserved a lot of films for MoMA. Because MoMA didn't have a laboratory. So the nitrates would come to Brussels, they would be preserved and go back to MoMA. In exchange of a print to stay in Brussels and a print that goes back to MoMA. The films must be shown everywhere. Of course, we have a museum where we show unique prints, thank you very much. Although, of course, we have prints that are unique, that can only they are played with the music or not, but they must be shown. That's why in mid-60s, he invents a distribution where buys rights and prints, acquisition, good prints, preservation, and these prints are distributed all over Belgium. There is nothing, I only learned it when I came to Brussels, there is nothing that we do now that was not done first by Jacques Ledoux. Nothing. And then he was not the founder of FIAF, because FIAF, as you know, was never founded. Because actually the piece of paper on which it was founded in 1938, the fondation, the body was never registered by Langlois. So technically, legally, it's Ledoux who found FIAF at the crisis when Langlois leaves. And in not only saves the FIAF together with Toeplitz and bring the Secretariat in Brussels, and will always keep the Secretariat in Brussels under his control until 1977, but he installs the Secretariat and the persons who run the FIAF for many years. And then he becomes the Secretary General. The commissions were all installed under Ledoux. There was no preservation commission, cataloging commission, nothing before Ledoux. All were installed under his guide. The periodical, which is the way that FIAF survives now, the periodical index, guess when was introduced and invented, and by whom? The first summer school, when and where, by whom? The name is always the same, Jacques Ledoux. Today I also discovered another thing. He left in 1977, and Brighton, the famous Congress of Brighton that opened up the history of cinema, was organized in 1978. But you know what? The outline was designed by Ledoux in 1977. And guess who suggested to invite scholars and actually pay for their trip to Brighton? Guess who? Ledoux. So that's why I say, yes, it was not the first to have the idea of conserving the film, but it was the first who had a coherent, comprehensive, all-around plan. Collection, preservation, conservation, restoration, distribution, by any necessary means. 16 shitty millimeter prints in the 60s? Yeah, why not? Because a 35 could be shown in the museum, and the 16 could go in the Cine Club. Sounds familiar to you guys? Does ring a bell, like we keep showing the original prints in our cinema, but God bless, we also show them on other formats around the world, because, and this is important for Jacques Ledoux, a Jew who escaped the camps, the cinema is there to change the world, and it won't change the world from within a dusty museum. The cinema must go out and win the world. For Ledoux, and I never met him, but it was not a job, it was a mission. And that's why he left the FIAF. Because in 1977 he felt that FIAF was being taken over by bureaucrats and the archives would become part of bigger organization and they would lose their independence. On that he fought, he lost, and he left. And to my humble opinion, that was the beginning of a serious crisis that we have not left now. I think Gianluca mentioned before, 1949, the first temperature-controlled vaults ever was built in Brussels by an institution that had no money at the time. That's another big teaching. Prioritize. Understand what your priorities are, and the priorities concerning the films and showing the films. That's the terrible thing about Ledoux. For him, everything an archive should do, must do, is a priority. And frankly, when I look around the field today, I feel that there are so many people who don't understand that this job is not a job. We don't do these things because we like to do them. We do these things because they have to be done. It's a responsibility we all have to collect, to preserve, and to show, and not in an order, all together at the same level. That's what Ledoux taught us. The problem is, and that's I go back to the first question, why we're still stuck in this discussion between Lindgren and Langlois. Because not only they let Ledoux live Fiat, but then because the dominant discourse was taken over by those who won the battle. Those large institutions who are very happy to say that there is this antinomy, Lindgren, the preservation, that we don't show nothing, we keep them on the shelves, which is dominant in Fiat for many years. And the other guy, the guy who showed the films, is outside and keeps the public sphere. And in the middle, the guy with the logical solution, we do both at the same level because that's what we are here to do. The guy who had the answer to the stupid question, because it's not even a question, it's obvious that we do the both things, was kicked out. And as I said, read the books about Fiat, he's hardly ever mentioned. Why? Because he was the man who built it all. He was the man who wrote the 10 Commandments when all the others stopped at 5 and didn't know how to go on. Now, I'm also very happy that there are not so many people here because this confirms my theory, confirms the theory that the complexity of the times we are is because we forgot what these people, like Ledoux and others, taught us in the past, and we like to forget it so we don't feel the responsibility to do what we should do. And also, I must say there are a few places where this sort of drive and sense of necessity is so strong as in Bologna. So, as the first issue of the Ledoux Prize for Good Archives, I brought something for Gianluca. These are numbered reproductions of the programs that he produced. So much for not being working with publicity. These are all made by the best artists in Belgium in the 50s and 60s. And for you guys who came here, so everybody of you can own a Magritte. These are the postcards that he made for the program. This is made by Magritte. This is an original. So all of you who came, come here, have a postcard, and you can go to see Folie des Femmes et les Rapaces, le train du séminaire des arts, à 8h30, mardi 8 octobre, 54. We are here for a mission, not for a job. Ah, by the way, if you look for a job, don't apply to Cinémathèque Royale, we only go mission. No, mais je suis sérieux, hein? This is for you. These are all for you. Et Gianluca, that's for your collection.
Wow! Merci Nicola, merci Eric de Kuyper. Dans ce jour, je suis partagé par la honte, entre la honte et le plaisir et être heureux. Mon honte, c'est que seulement maintenant je peux remercier en public Eric de Kuyper. Je l'ai déjà fait pendant le congrès de la FIAF. Eric de Kuyper, c'est vraiment quelqu'un de très important dans ma vie et dans la vie de ce festival. On a appris beaucoup de lui, on a appris beaucoup de son travail avec Rosberg Bloch. Ils nous ont appris qu'il fallait regarder les choses de manière différente, qu'il ne fallait pas croire à tout ce qu'on disait. Il nous a appris que l'importance, la valeur, la richesse de la première époque du cinéma. Il nous a appris que le travail primaire dans une cinémathèque, c'est le travail sur la collection. Il nous a appris qu'est-ce que ça veut dire la restauration. Il nous a appris l'importance du travail que le Cinémathèque doit avoir avec un laboratoire. C'est une tension, c'est un travail extrêmement compliqué, mais c'est une relation essentielle. Il nous a appris comment on pouvait programmer les films, comment on pouvait programmer les films qui normalement sont les restes, qui sont à la cuisine, qui n'intéressent personne, et qui par contre peuvent nous donner du plaisir. Et je crois beaucoup dans ces nouveaux espaces qu'on a créés cette année de réflexion sur les fondateurs, les gens qui ont eu un rôle dans l'histoire des cinémathèques. C'était important de commencer ces réflexions à partir de cette année. C'est l'année dans laquelle le festival se touche avec l'histoire de la FIAF, parce qu'il vient de s'arrêter le congrès de la FIAF. Et c'est assez étonnant que l'ensemble des cinémathèques qui quand même s'occupent de la mémoire, le cinémathèque c'est avant tout conserver la mémoire et essayer de la faire connaître à tout le monde, dans le public le plus large possible. C'est assez étonnant qu'il y a très peu de livres, très peu de réflexions sur l'histoire des cinémathèques, qu'on sait tellement peu sur les grandes personnalités. Et donc je remercie vraiment Nicola pour le travail de redécouvert de Jacques Ledoux, grande personnalité, trop peu connue. Et je le remercie aussi pour la façon avec laquelle l'énergie politique, parce que c'est essentiel si on veut changer le futur, connaître un peu mieux les passés des archives. Ça nous donnera des idées meilleures pour le futur. Et surtout, j'espère qu'il commence à être clair que chaque directeur est ici un passage entre le passé et ce qu'il y aura dans le futur. Mais pour avoir le futur, il faut bien connaître nos pères et nos mères. Merci.